sure somebody has a question.
Whoa.
What did you read for inspiration?
What did you read for inspiration?
I read as partly, I think, some of the works of Robert Louis Stevenson, Kidnapped. Because there is, in a lot of Stevenson's, there's a crooked uncle. The protagonist gets booted out of his castle. He usually goes out and recruits some allies and comes back and routs the bad guys. So there was that in there. That's the one, actually the one I can think of right now.
What about the research? Did you have to spend time in the library?
Well, not so much, because I kept a lot of the notes of my great-grandfather's diaries and journals. I have them. And the other thing is that my parents were pack rats. They were good people. They were pack rats. So a lot of this I discovered, came across notes while I was, they had 5 storages in California. So I was going through things, and I still visit Iowa. And so I guess you could say that it wasn't that difficult, because I would visit, it's a town of Audubon. I would visit there maybe every 3 to 5 years. And so it's not foreign. No, I mean, I didn't have to do that much.
But it did take you 6 years, so what was it, was it the fact that you took breaks? What was it that made it take that long?
Well, it's a long book.
It is a long book. And it is definitely a long book, I would say that.
It's a long book. The editing thing I want to maybe mention, that when I first wrote it, it was 600 pages. And that was as long as I could get it. Now, Lorraine over here read it several times, and I take my hat off to Lorraine. I went to Gotham Writers Workshop, and they said, you need to have it edited. You need, in other words, and I figured, I learned this, that when you're alone in writing, everything works. Bad, sloppiness works. Love scenes are moving. Everything works. Well, okay, there was a group that was called Independent Editors Group. And so there was a man named Richard Merrick, who was one of there were like 12, these were 12 editors or people who were maybe former publishers, agents, editors themselves. Well, okay, Richard Merrick was the former head of Dutton Books. He had edited the first 5 Robert Ludlum books, and he'd edited Silence of the Lambs before it became Silence of the Lambs. Well, he's up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, so I figured, okay, he can only say no. So I wrote him, and I said, I've got this book. It's pro-America, yeah, rah, 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 and gave an explanation about Iowa and everything, and could I interest you, or taking me on as a client, at least to read it? So he said, send it to me. So he did, or I sent it to him, and he went through it, and of course I ended up paying for this, but it was worth it. And he came back, and he had written about 30 pages. And essentially, he said, this book it's overwritten, it's bloated, you say many things twice, you repeat yourself, but he said, you've got a protagonist that is highly winning to me, and he said, you make me want to turn the page to see what happens next. So he said, there's a book in there. So I said, would you take me on as a client? And so that was the next 3 years. Now, what happened was I'd send him 50-page chunks. This is where the writing of the book became like scenes from The Karate Kid. But between Ralph Macchio and Mr. Miyagi, yes. And I'd send him 50 pages, and he would send them back, and they would hack just like this, but good stuff. There was one time I sent him 50, and he drew a line through the middle of the 48th page, and he cut out everything from the last half, all 49, all 50. And he said at the line where he drew, he says, if you want to punch him in the eye, stop right here. So I learned more from writing from this man, I think, than I'd say any school course that I could have ever taken. Because these were all like my mistakes. And these were things I did, and he was he was addressing my writing. And so I was not studying rules. And that was an education.
So is it like him saying, you're saying too much, you need to stop, you need to create the suspense? Was that what you were learning from that?
Well, it was, if I, for example, again, well, maybe here, I tend to ramble a bit. So he'd draw lines through it, and I could see what he was doing. Maybe the first sentence, the third sentence, and the last one made perfect sense. So we cut 150 pages out of it. And it was great. I mean, that was work, because I'd get something back, and I'd say, you son of a gun, and then I'd see what he was right, and it worked.
You know, there's one philosophy that writers are often told. I'm a writer as myself, but I write articles. And they always tell us, write your article and then cut out the first 2 paragraphs. And that's where your story begins.
Yes.
And if you do that, it's amazing sometimes because that's when you finally, sort of get to the heart of it. So do we have any more questions? No? Okay. So do you